The deadline hit. Hours earlier, Trump had posted, "A whole civilization will die tonight." Markets froze. Kuwait told its citizens to stay home from midnight. The world held its breath. Then, a deal. Within hours, people were celebrating in Tehran's Revolution Square. Oil dropped nearly 16%, the single largest one-day oil price drop in months. Stock markets from Seoul to London surged. Within 24 hours of the ceasefire announcement, Iran suspended tanker traffic through the Strait of Hormuz again. The White House called the reports false. Iran's state media said the strait was closed due to Israeli strikes on Lebanon. 2 tankers passed, then nothing. 2 sides, 2 victory speeches, 2 completely different versions of what was actually agreed. This is what the verified record shows, and why the next 14 days may determine whether this ceasefire holds or becomes the opening move in the next round. To understand why this ceasefire is fragile, you need to understand how it happened. The war began February 28, 2026, when the US and Israel launched Operation Epic Fury, striking Iranian military infrastructure, nuclear sites, and leadership according to Wikipedia's Hormuz crisis entry. Iran's response was immediate, closing the Strait of Hormuz to commercial traffic, sending oil prices from approximately $70 to nearly $120 per barrel at peak. Trump set 3 separate deadlines for Iran to reopen Hormuz, extending each one as mediators claimed progress. On March 23, he postponed a planned attack for 5 days. On March 26, he announced another delay until early April. Al Jazeera by Tuesday, April 8th, the deadline was real. Trump posted that a whole civilization will die tonight, according to CBS News. Kuwait's government issued a midnight curfew order for its citizens. The Pentagon confirmed U.S. forces were ready to execute strikes. Then Pakistan intervened. Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and Field Marshal Asim Munir contacted Trump directly, requesting he hold off. Trump agreed, suspending the bombing campaign for 2 weeks, conditional on Iran's complete, immediate, and safe opening of the Strait of Hormuz. Al Jazeera Pakistan's PM Sharif invited both delegations to Islamabad on April 10 to negotiate a conclusive agreement to settle all disputes. Al Jazeera, that meeting is tomorrow as of this video. Here is where the ceasefire gets complicated immediately. Both sides announced victory. Both sides described the deal differently, and those differences are not small. Trump called the ceasefire a big day for world peace and said Iran had agreed to the complete, immediate, and safe opening of the Strait of Hormuz. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said Trump's tough rhetoric led the Iranian regime to agree to the deal. NBC News Trump also floated on Truth Social that the U.S. might earn revenue from the Strait of Hormuz, a concept discussed at the Wednesday White House briefing, according to CNN. Iran's Supreme National Security Council, through the IRGC-linked Tasnim news agency, said Tehran had forced the U.S. to accept a 10-point plan, including continued Iranian control over the Strait of Hormuz, acceptance of uranium enrichment, lifting of all sanctions, withdrawal of U.S. combat forces from the region, and stopping the war on all fronts, including against Hezbollah in Lebanon. CBS News, these are not minor differences in framing. They describe fundamentally opposite outcomes. According to Matt Gherkin, chief geopolitical strategist at BCA Research, there is a deep trust deficit on both sides. From Washington's perspective, long-standing concerns over Iran's nuclear program. From Tehran's side, deep skepticism about U.S. intentions, especially given past withdrawals from agreements. CNBC, the ceasefire began breaking within hours, and the reason is Lebanon. Israel said it was not covered by the ceasefire agreement, directly contradicting Pakistan's mediator claim that it was. Lebanon's health ministry reported hundreds killed or wounded in new Israeli strikes described by the Israeli military as the heaviest bombardment yet. NBC News Iran's Fars news agency reported that tanker traffic through the Strait of Hormuz was suspended after Israeli strikes on Lebanon. Iran's Tasnim news agency cited an anonymous senior security source saying Tehran could pull out of the ceasefire agreement entirely over Israel's actions. CBS News King's College analyst Andreas Krieg warned, "The greatest threat to any ceasefire in the region remains Israel," adding that Israel prefers ambiguous ceasefire deals that allow it to return to fighting when it feels the situation favors its military. Al Jazeera, the White House, on Wednesday told reporters that Iran had assured them Hormuz was open, while simultaneously Iranian state media was reporting it closed, according to CNN. Both statements were made within hours of each other. Bloomberg reported that Mona Yacoubian, senior advisor at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, said the possibility of Iranian armed forces coordinating ships passing through Hormuz could be seen as a huge concession to Iran, essentially recognizing Iranian gatekeeping authority over the world's most important energy corridor. Bloomberg, the reason this ceasefire is fragile is not just Lebanon, it is the gap between what each side says it agreed to, what the U.S. says it wants. According to Fox News and CBS News reporting, Trump's position includes the complete reopening of Hormuz without conditions, Iran abandoning nuclear weapons capability including halting enrichment, Iran curbing its missile program, and Iran reducing regional military activity. What Iran says it agreed to. Iran's 10-point plan, as described by its Supreme National Security Council, includes controlled passage through Hormuz coordinated with Iranian armed forces, ending the war against all components of the resistance axis, including Hezbollah, withdrawal of U.S. combat forces from all regional bases, establishment of a secure transit protocol ensuring Iranian control under the agreed framework, acceptance of uranium enrichment, lifting of all primary and secondary sanctions, and compensation payments to Iran. NBC News, these two positions are not a negotiating gap. They are opposite outcomes. One side is describing a deal where Iran surrenders its leverage. The other is describing a deal where Iran's leverage is permanently legitimized. Michael Langham, emerging markets economist at Aberdeen Investments, said the ceasefire will likely hold in the near term given the economic costs of 6 weeks of conflict. But Matt Gherkin warned Trump may temporarily accept Iran as a gatekeeper, with U.S. midterm elections approaching and gasoline prices sharply higher. But after the election, the U.S. national security establishment will demand a more permanent solution. Fighting will ignite later this year, if not later this month. CNBC markets reacted with immediate relief. Brent crude dropped nearly 16%, and WTI fell over 9% on ceasefire news. The S&P 500 surged 3%. The Nasdaq soared 8%, the Dow spiked 1,200 points. Seoul jumped 9%, Tokyo 4%. CBS News, but analysts warned the euphoria was running ahead of the facts. Evercore Vice Chairman Krishna Guha wrote, "We are not out of the woods yet. The ceasefire could fall apart." JP Morgan strategists noted the market reaction felt like euphoria returning, but qualified it by saying this assumed the deal was not a feint from any of the parties. CNBC oil is still trading approximately 35% above pre-war levels, according to CNBC reporting. The U.S. Energy Information Administration warned that energy prices are expected to stay high for much of 2026 because it will take months to fully restore oil flow, even after the strait reopens. The EIA raised its gasoline price forecast to $4.30 per gallon peak this month. CNN, the war caused Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, the UAE, Qatar, and Bahrain to collectively shut in an estimated 7.5 million barrels per day of crude oil production in March, rising to an estimated 9.1 million barrels per day this month, according to the EIA. CNN, the disruption does not end the day the ceasefire holds. It ends months after the last tanker safely clears the strait. Here is the analytical question that serious observers are asking, and it is worth examining without taking sides. Iranian scholars Zainab Malikuti and Mohammad Eslami, writing for Responsible Statecraft, argue that Hormuz is not a tool to end the war, it is how Iran wins the aftermath. They write that Iran sees the Strait of Hormuz as a longer-term strategic lever, especially for the post-war period. Democracy now. Consider the sequence from Iran's perspective. Before the war, Iran had no internationally recognized role in controlling Hormuz traffic. Now, under the ceasefire terms, as Iran describes them, Iranian armed forces coordinate all vessel passage. That is a significant shift in the diplomatic baseline, regardless of whether the U.S. formally acknowledges it. Trita Parsi, vice president at the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft, said the potential talks in Islamabad could fail, but the terrain has shifted. Trump's use of force has blunted the credibility of American military threats. Al Jazeera, from the U.S. perspective, the ceasefire stopped the economic bleeding, gas prices were surging, allies were not joining the military effort, and Trump was facing domestic pressure, according to Al Jazeera. The 2-week pause gives space for negotiations that could produce a more durable outcome. Both readings are analytically defensible. The Islamabad talks on April 10, tomorrow, are the first real test of which version of the deal is actually operative. Here is the honest picture as of today. A ceasefire exists on paper. 2 tankers passed through the Strait of Hormuz after the ceasefire was announced. Then tanker traffic was suspended again as Iran cited Israeli strikes on Lebanon. NBC News, the White House, said the strait is open. Iranian state media said it is closed. Both statements were made on the same day. The two negotiating positions described by each side are fundamentally different on the core questions: Hormuz control, uranium enrichment, U.S. military presence, and Lebanon. The ceasefire will likely hold in the near term given the economic costs to all parties. But analysts from BCA Research to Evercore have flagged that the trust deficit on both sides and the unresolved Lebanon question make a collapse entirely possible, potentially within weeks rather than months. CNBC Islamabad talks begin April 10. The next 14 days will reveal whether the two sides are negotiating the same deal or two completely different ones. This video is based entirely on verified public reporting. Sources: NBC News, CBS News, Al Jazeera, CNN, Bloomberg, CNBC, Axios, Fox News, Wikipedia 2026, Hormuz Crisis, U.S. Energy Information Administration, BCA Research, Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft, Aberdeen Investments, Evercore, JP Morgan.